Hello everybody, this is Mr. Longo here, and in this video we are going to cover the law of sines. Now, I will tell you that the law of sines, there's different ways to approach it based on how do you know when you're going to use the law of sines, or when you're going to use the law of cosines. Well, it depends on what's given. Anytime you're given two angles, you can use the law of sines, so whether it's the angle-side-angle pattern or angle-angle-side pattern. The only time we can use the law of sines when we are given two sides and one angle is the angle-side-side pattern. I know, so funny, look what it says. However, that's a way to do it. The other way is when we get into some of the diagrams, if we have big A and little a, or big B and little b, big C and little c, anytime we have both of the same letters, meaning an angle and the side opposite, we can use the law of sines. If not, we're going to use the law of cosines, which will be discussed in another video. You also need a calculator, and you need to know how to use it, and it needs to be in degrees. So when we solve a triangle for all of its missing information, we need to know how to name things. So if we have triangle ABC, little a is the side opposite of angle A. Little b is the side opposite of angle B. And little c is the side opposite of angle C. Okay? So now that we know a little bit about the basics, we are going to apply this formula. So this formula right here is the law of sines. And basically that it states is the sine of the angle over its opposite side is going to be equal to the sine of another angle over its opposite side. You only use two at a time, so don't freak out about the fact that there's three fractions. So, this is what we're going to do. We're going to tackle the first one, and then I'll pause and let you try the second one. I do want you to know that the second question is an angle-side-side pattern one, and it actually has a video of its own, because that's actually known as an ambiguous case, but we'll talk about that when we get there. Okay, so question number one. We are given angle B is 28. We are given that angle C is 103. And we are given that little b is 26. So, again, you can look at that and say, hey, that's the angle-angle-side pattern. Or you could simply look at the fact that we have a big B and a little b. If you have big B and little b, or big A, big C, little c, you can use the law of sines. Very special note. Anytime you have two angles, you can find the third angle by simply subtracting from 180 degrees. So since angle A is the only missing angle, we just subtract 28 and 103 from 180, and we end up with 49 degrees. So we also know that angle A is 49 degrees. So how do we find the rest? Well, I always use the first given opposite side and angle combination. So we have the sine of B, but we're going to write that down as the sine of 28 over the side length, 26, and that's equal to, now pick something else. I tend to work in alphabetical order for no good reason whatsoever, so I'm going to find A first. So I'm going to say that the sine of 49 over little a. And now what we're going to do is find the side length, little a. Now again, most of this takes place with the calculator, but we need to talk about how we get there. And it's actually just cross-multiplying a proportion. So to do this, we would have a times the sine of 28. So we have a sine 28 is equal to, cross-multiply again, 26 sine of 49. Now you can, if you want to, type this into the calculator, but you're going to have some crazy decimals. So I'm just going to solve for a. So if I want to get a by itself now, all I have to do is divide both sides by the sine of 28. Remember, the sine of 28 is an actual number. We can type that in the calculator and get a decimal answer. But to make things easier, I'm just going to divide by the sine of 28 now. Those would cancel. So a is equal to 26 sine of 49 divided by the sine of 28. And our calculator can handle that. All we have to do is tell it what to do. So we have 26 times the sine of 49. And if you want, you can click enter and get that nasty decimal. And then we can just press divided by the sine of 28. And boom, we have 41.8. So we know that the length of little a is going to give us 41.8. So we have it, 41.8. Done. Now again, if you wanted to, you could type that whole thing into the calculator all at once. But that's it. We just found a. So what I would like you to do is pause the video, set up the proportion you would need to solve for little c, use your calculator and see if you can get it. And as soon as you're ready to see if you did it right, click play and we'll go through it. Giddy up! Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm always going to use the one that was given. So all you had to do is take the sine of 28 divided by 26, and this time you would have set it equal to the sine of 103 divided by little c. And again, you would just type this in the calculator after you cross multiply. So I'm going to show you this time that sometimes it's helpful to use parentheses. When we cross multiply, we would have had 26 times the sine of 103, close the parentheses for your angle, and then close the parentheses that we're doing the whole thing, divided by just the sine of 28, and click enter. And this time we're going to get 53.962, or in this case, if we were rounding to the nearest tenth, we would actually round all the way up to 54. So be very careful and make sure that you pay attention to whatever your rounding rules are. In many classes, we'll round to 3 decimal places, and others we just round to the nearest tenth. For the purpose of this video, to make it simple and less to write, I use the nearest tenth. But make sure you pay attention to whatever your teacher tells you to round to, okay? So that's how we use the law of sines. Now, you would notice that the only thing I did in this case for calculator skills is find sides. This is an example of an angle side-side pattern. Now, in the law of sines, there is going to be a second video just covering the angle side-side ambiguous case. When you have this pattern, you can actually have more than one triangle. You can actually have no triangles, depending on how long certain sides are. But this is an example where there's only going to be one solution, so I'm going to show it to you. And we are going to round angles to the nearest minute for this video. So we are given angle B. We know that angle B is 60. We know that little a is something we need to find. We know that little b is 30. And we know little c is 20. So when we work with this, it's the exact same pattern, so it's the exact same setup. We're going to have the sine of 60 over 30 is equal to, in this case, we need to find angle C first. So this is going to be the sine of angle C over 20. So again, same setup, but solving for C is a little bit different this time. So we're still going to cross multiply. That's going to give us 20 times the sine of 60 is equal to 30 sine C. But if we're going to solve for C, we need to divide both sides by 30. And then that's going to give us 20 sine 60 divided by 30 is equal to the sine of C. Now remember, when we're finding an angle, we have to use inverse trig. So to find inverse trig, we use the second button when we're trying to find the sine. So in this case, we're just going to type 20 times the sine of 60, and you can click enter. And then we're going to divide that by just 30 and click enter, and that's what sine of c is equal to. Now again, depending on how you use your calculator, we're just going to press second sine. And if you have a fancy calculator, you can just scroll up and get that. If yours is a little bit older, remember if you click second negative, that's going to say take the inverse sine of the previous answer, click enter, and it's going to be 35.26 for blah, 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 blah. If you press second apps, it'll take you to the angle menu. Number 4 is going to change it to degrees, minutes, and seconds. So we have 35 degrees, 15 minutes, and 51 seconds. Now remember, 51 is more than half a minute. So if we're rounding to the nearest minute, we are going to have an angle measurement of 35 degrees and 16 minutes. Okay, so we just found angle C is 35 degrees and 16 minutes. Now, of course, to find angle A, it's easy. Now that we have two angles, we just subtract both of them from 180 degrees, and that will tell us that angle A is 84 degrees and 44 minutes. So now all we have to do is go and find the length of side A. So since we have angle A and we have our original, our second equation would just be set up as the sine of 60 over 30 is equal to the sine of A, which is 84 degrees and 44 minutes. And then that's over little a. Now we already discussed how we use our calculator to do that in the problem above. We would just cross multiply. It would be 30 times the sine of 84 degrees and 44 minutes divided by the sine of 60, and we will get a length of A as 34.5 units. Okay? Now that is the law of sines. Now again, number 2 is the angle side pattern. It will have its own video if that's something you are going to learn in your course. All right? This is Longo and I'm out. See you, bye.